Naturally, he would not allow her go back. Instead, he chained her in bronze shackles and ordered her to follow him. This is the story of a proud princess called Titi. A long time ago, there lived a wealthy and affluent Oba in the kingdom of Great Benin. He had a very beautiful daughter of marriageable age. Her name was Titi, and she was the most beautiful girl in the whole kingdom. Her skin was as beautiful as rich mahogany, warm and inviting under the African sun. Her almond-shaped eyes sparkled like warm honey, and on her head was a crown of intricately braided cotton-like coils, adorned with rare coral beads. No maiden in the whole of Benin Kingdom could compare to her. She was so beautiful that all the eligible bachelors in the kingdom wanted to marry her, but she refused all offers of marriage. Most of the rich old men asked for her hand in marriage, but she called them ugly and old. And when handsome young men came for her hand, she furiously turned them down. Princess Titi wanted a man more handsome than the most handsome, richer than any Oba or chief, and taller than all the men in the kingdom. Despite repeated pleas from her parents, the Oba and the Oloi, she vowed that she would marry a prince from a faraway kingdom, and she insisted that her prince would be the best-looking man in the entire kingdom. He would be strong and perfect in every way, and capable of loving her properly. So, Titi the princess continued to disobey her parents. Not long after, the news got to the palace. A very handsome man, draped in golden attire and jewelry, had been seen in the market square. He was richer, taller, and better looking than any of the natives. Princess Titi rushed to the market square at once, and immediately she saw the most handsome man she had ever set eyes on. He was perfect in every way. The princess couldn't believe her eyes. She had manifested the prince of her dreams. She fell in love with him immediately and invited him to the royal palace. The handsome man was delighted and went home with her. On his arrival, the handsome man was introduced by Titi to her parents. He introduced himself as Prince Idigo and asked their consent to marry their daughter. At first they refused, as they did not wish her to marry a stranger. But the princess was enraged and refused to eat for many days, forcing the Oba and the queen to agree at last. Quickly, the prince and princess were wedded, and for a full month, the handsome prince lived with Titi in the royal palace. Then one day, he announced to his new bride and her parents that he wished to take his wife back to his country, which was far away. The princess readily agreed, as she was in love with his handsomeness and trusted him completely. But her parents didn't want her to leave. They tried to persuade her not to go. However, Princess Titi was very headstrong and had made up her mind to go, and so they started off together. It was a sad day for the king and the queen, but the princess was overjoyed. She had gotten everything she ever wanted in a man and was eager to start her new life with her handsome prince. Everything was perfect. But the vain princess would soon find out that not everything that glitters is gold. After walking for several days, Titi and her husband crossed the border between the spirit land and the human land. Immediately they set foot in spirit land, strange things began to happen. First of all, one man came to the prince and demanded his legs. Then another came and demanded his head, and the next his body, and so on, until in a few minutes the prince was left with nothing but a skeleton. The princess became terrified. She could not understand what had happened to her handsome prince. The prince then laughed at the princess and confessed that the princess was now seeing him in his natural state. He told her how he had been walking in the spirit world and had seen her by the river. He had fallen in love with her and had borrowed all his body parts from the other spirits so he would look human. when he went to ask for her hand in marriage. In fact, his entire body consisted of only a human skeleton. The princess wanted to return home, but the skeleton grew angry and enraged. He had sacrificed everything to enter the world of the living, all for the love he had for the princess. So naturally, he would not allow her go back. Instead, he chained her in bronze shackles and ordered her to follow him. When they arrived at the skeleton's house, they found his mother, who was a very old woman, quite incapable of doing any work. She could only creep about. Princess Titi, who was now a prisoner, felt pity for the old woman. She tried her best to help her. She cooked their food and brought water and firewood for the old woman. The old woman was very grateful for these attentions and soon grew quite fond of Titi. One day, the old woman felt very sorry for Titi and decided to help her. She promised to send her back to the world of the living as soon as possible, providing that she promised that in the future she would obey her parents. This Princess Titi readily consented to do. Then the old woman sent for the spider, who was a very clever hairdresser, and made him dress Titi's hair in the latest fashion. She also presented her with anklets and other things on account of her kindness. She then used her supernatural power to call the breeze to gently carry Titi to her father's kingdom. Soon afterwards, the breeze deposited Titi outside her home and left her there. When the Oba and the Queen saw their daughter, they were very glad, as they had for some months given her up as lost. There was feasting and dancing throughout the kingdom for 8 days and 8 nights. Afterwards, the Oba of Benin passed a law that parents should never allow their daughters to marry strangers who came from a far country. Until today, many Edo parents do not like to hand over their daughters to strangers for marriage. Not too long after, a prince from a neighboring village came to ask for Princess Titi's hand in marriage, and with the full support of her parents, she willingly consented and lived with him for many years. And they had many children. Tell me, if you were Princess Titi's parents,